In this lesson, we're going to look at the past simple of regular and irregular verbs. So, let's talk about what happened. Let's take a look at the cartoon. Can you find an example of a regular verb being used in its past form in a positive sentence? If you said, "We watched a science fiction film," then you're correct. Watched is the past form of the verb watch. Now, can you find an example of an irregular verb being used in its past simple form in a positive way? You should have found two sentences. The first one is, "We went to the cinema," and the second is, "Then we had dinner at Frankie's." Went is the past form of the verb go, and had is the past form of the verb have. Now, can you find an example of negative past simple form? If you chose the sentence, "We didn't get home until midnight," then you're correct. Notice we have the verb get, which is not in its past form got. We know the sentence is negative because of the word didn't. We use didn't to make the sentence negative and tell us it's in the past, and we can leave the verb get in its present form. Finally, can you find an example of using past simple in a question? Of course, it's the only sentence that's left. What did you do last night? Again, we've used did to tell us that we're in the past simple, and the verb do is left in its present form. In the cartoon, we saw examples of using both regular and irregular verbs in their past form. For regular verbs, we add ed. So watch becomes watched. Irregular verbs, we don't add ed. They change completely. So our example was, go becomes went. As we already said, past simple regular verbs end in ed. There's a few spelling rules you need to remember. For most verbs, we just add ed. Watch becomes watched, finish becomes finished. But these other spellings you need to remember. If a word ends in e, we only add d. Die becomes died, live becomes lived, and like becomes liked. If a word ends in a short vowel before the last letter, then we have to double the last letter. Stop becomes stopped. S-T-O-P-P-E-D. And finally, if the word ends in Y, then we change the Y to I and add ed. Carry becomes carried, and study becomes studied. S-T-U-D-I-E-D. The great thing about past simple is it's the same no matter what the subject is. I, you, he, she, it, we, you, or they are all the same. I finished yesterday. She finished yesterday. They finished yesterday. Unfortunately, not all verbs are regular verbs. We also have irregular verbs. For these verbs, we do not add ed. You have to memorize the form they take for past simple. You just have to memorize them. Some of the more common ones are buy, which becomes bought, do, did, have, had, go, went, and so on. To see a full list, or most anyways, you can look on page 160 of your English Unlimited book. A good way to practice the past simple form of irregular verbs is to make a set of flashcards. Let's take a look at these verbs. Do you know the past simple of eat? If you said ate, you're correct. What about the past simple of sit? Sat is the correct answer. The past of swim, if you said swam, you're right. And the past of get, got. Again, to learn the irregular verbs, you need to practice. For past simple negative, or to make a question in the past simple, we need to use the past form of the verb do, which is did. The main verb stays in its present form. And the great news is, just like in positive sentences in the past, it's the same no matter what your subject is. So we can say I, he, she, it, we, you, they, did, and to make it negative, we add not, and then we have the main verb. He did not arrive to class on time. So for negative, you have to have did plus not plus the verb in its present form, which we'll call verb 1. Now, if we want to make a question, we also use did. For short answer questions, those that we answer with yes or no, we start our question with did. Then we have our subject, I, he, she, we, it, you, or they. Then we have our main verb. Again, it's in verb 1 form. So, for a question, we have did plus the subject. Then we have verb 1. Remember, in our negative sentence, your subject will come before did. Now, we can also use question words. Just like when we did past simple with verb to be, our question word will come first. This is then followed by our standard formula with did, the subject, such as you, and then our main verb in its present form, for example, do, and then what we're asking about. So we can have, what did you do on Saturday? Another example is, where did you go for dinner? And how much did the meal cost? When do we use past simple? We can use it to talk about a single, that means one, finished action or event from the past. For example, he went to the cinema yesterday. We can show the action with an X. If this is the present, then the action, went to the cinema, happened yesterday. It's an action that started and finished in the past. We can also use past simple to talk about a repeated finished action or event from the past. Repeated means the same action happened again and again. For example, he called your mobile phone 4 times yesterday. We have 4 of the same action that started and finished in the past. We can also use past simple to talk about a series of finished actions or events from the past. That is, a set of different actions that happened one after the other. For example, they arrived at the airport at 7 p.m., checked in their baggage, then waited for their flight. So we have a series of related actions that happen one after the other in the past. Remember, which of course should have an E. We often use time expressions such as last year, 2 weeks ago, to say when something happened. Let's look at some examples. Daniel Craig made his first film in 2006. I started work last month. It rained all day yesterday. My English course started 2 months ago, which means it started 2 months before now. Remember, you really need to practice using the past simple, especially those irregular verbs. Again, you can look at page 160 of your English Unlimited book for a big list of irregular verbs, and I really suggest you make some flashcards. You can either do it on your iPads, you can ask one of your teachers about how to do this, or you can go the old-fashioned way and use some paper to make some flashcards that you can carry around with you in your pocket.